He faked being disabled for his first love and tricked me for 40 years. I swore he'd regret it. Chapter 1: The Truth I Couldn't See. For 40 years, I stood by him. Liam Bennett, a man who wore his supposed disability like a shroud, a constant reminder of the debt I owed him. But now, after all these years of silent devotion, I find myself standing at the precipice of a truth I should have seen long ago. It all began when I was young, lost, without purpose or direction. The Peking Opera Troupe had given me a sense of belonging, a place where I could express myself through music and dance. But one day, it all came crashing down. My world, once vibrant and full of possibility, became darkened by failure and rejection. The troupe had expelled me for reasons I couldn't understand, and I was left with nothing. That was when Liam came into my life. He was gentle, kind, and, in my eyes, a savior. He claimed to be disabled. An accident years ago had taken away his ability to walk, he told me, leaving him isolated and dependent on others. His dark brown eyes, so full of sorrow and vulnerability, reached into my soul. I felt an overwhelming need to care for him, to make up for the failure I had endured. "I need you," Liam said one day, looking up at me from his chair. He had never asked for much, never demanded anything of me, but somehow, I knew I was all he had. And so, with no hesitation, I agreed to stay by his side. I became his caretaker, his housekeeper, his nurse, his constant companion. My life became a rhythm of doing things for him, from the smallest tasks like preparing meals to the more intricate chores of making his life as comfortable as possible. I believed I was fulfilling a debt, giving him the life he deserved after all the pain he had suffered. It was a choice, a sacrifice that felt both noble and right. But over the years, something shifted. A nagging feeling I couldn't place began to grow in the pit of my stomach. I would catch glimpses of something in Liam's eyes, something that didn't belong in a man who was supposed to be disabled. The way he would move when he thought I wasn't watching, the subtle way his hand would twitch when he thought I was focused on something else. There were small things, moments where his true nature slipped through the cracks, but I had always dismissed them. After all, what was I to question? He had done so much for me when I had nothing left, and I had given him everything in return. When we married, it was out of guilt. I felt I owed him my life after everything he had done for me. I thought that in marrying him, I was giving him the love and care he had never received, the life he deserved. I was naive, thinking that love could heal anything, and that our bond could make up for the lies that had been buried so deep. One day, however, it all came crashing down. I was cleaning the attic, a place we hadn't used in years, when I came across an old photo album, one I hadn't seen before. It was hidden away beneath stacks of forgotten boxes, its cover worn and faded. As I flipped through the pages, I froze. There, in the very first picture, was Liam, standing tall, smiling, healthy. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He wasn't disabled. My heart skipped a beat, the realization striking me like a bolt of lightning. My hands shook as I turned the pages, each one revealing more of the truth I had been blind to for so long. Liam, the man I had cared for, who had claimed to be broken, was never truly broken at all. He had fooled me, made me believe in a lie for all these years. I felt the ground beneath me shift, the life I had built with Liam beginning to unravel. For the first time in decades, I saw the truth. He had never been the man I thought he was. And now, I was left to confront the fact that everything I had given him, every moment of my life, had been based on a lie. I could no longer deny the truth that had been staring me in the face all these years. I had been a pawn in Liam's game, a woman consumed by guilt and devotion, who had been manipulated into sacrificing herself for a man who had never truly needed saving. I sat on the attic floor, the weight of the discovery pressing down on me. The question now was not just how I would confront Liam, but how I would move forward from this point. Could I rebuild a life that had been so carefully constructed on the foundation of a lie? I had given him 40 years. But now, It was time to give myself the life I deserved. Chapter 2: The Moment of Truth. It was supposed to be a celebration. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of devotion and sacrifice. A golden wedding anniversary that marked a lifetime of shared moments, struggles, and triumphs. I thought I had seen it all. I believed that after everything we had gone through together, nothing could surprise me anymore. But that day, that one moment, changed everything. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the garden where I had spent countless hours tending to the flowers. Liam and I had spent years perfecting this small, quiet sanctuary, my haven, where I could forget the world and lose myself in the peace of nature. That evening, the air was still, and the scent of blooming roses filled the space between us. We had planned a simple dinner, just the two of us, to mark our anniversary. I had spent the entire day preparing his favorite meal, and though he didn't ask for much, I wanted to make it special. Liam had been in his wheelchair, as usual, and he smiled at me from the patio, his eyes soft with the affection that had kept us together for so long. I thought I had it all figured out, our life, our love, everything. I had spent decades caring for him, living for him, believing that this was what love looked like. Then, the phone rang. The sudden noise shattered the quiet evening, pulling Liam's attention away from the dinner table and onto the device in his lap. He reached for it, but before he could pick it up, something strange happened. Something I would never have expected. Liam's face shifted in an instant, a look of panic flashing across his features. His hand shook as he gripped the edge of his wheelchair. Before I could ask him what was wrong, Liam's expression turned to one of raw urgency. "Liam?" I called out, confused by the sudden change in him. But he didn't hear me. He didn't even seem to notice that I was standing there. His eyes, wide and frantic, fixed on something in the distance, beyond our garden, towards the street. His voice cracked as he muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt the fear and desperation in his tone. And then, without warning, Liam did something I never thought I'd witness in my lifetime. He pushed himself out of the wheelchair with surprising force, his legs, once thought to be immobile, now trembling as he stood. "Liam! What are you doing?" I cried out, rushing toward him, but it was too late. In a flash, he was gone. He ran. It was like watching a different man, one who was no longer crippled by the injury I had believed had defined him for decades. He moved with a speed that shocked me, heading toward the edge of the street where a fire blazed out of control, consuming the house of someone I had never thought to consider, a woman whose name I had never expected to hear again. Liam's first love. The woman he had never stopped pining for. The house was in flames, the orange glow illuminating the night sky. Smoke billowed into the air, and I could hear the frantic voices of neighbors shouting, but none of it registered as I stood frozen in shock. Liam, a man I had cared for, nursed back to health, and devoted my entire life to, was running towards the fire, not out of duty, not for any reason that made sense, but for her. I ran after him, my heart pounding in my chest, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. I reached him just as he neared the inferno, his face twisted with determination, as if the world itself couldn't stop him. I grabbed his arm, pulling him back, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Liam, stop! What are you doing?" I screamed, but he barely reacted to my touch. His gaze met mine for a brief moment, and for the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't recognized: shame. I have to go back to her, Emily, he said softly, his voice choked with emotion. I have to save her. And just like that, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. The lie I had lived for so long, the life I had sacrificed for, was nothing but a facade. Liam had never needed me the way I thought he did. I wasn't the person he loved, the person he wanted. I had always been second place. I had known for a while that something was wrong, but I never imagined it would come to this, his final act of betrayal, in front of my very eyes. A woman from his past, the one he had never stopped loving, had always been more than I could ever be. The years of my devotion, the sacrifices I had made, they meant nothing in the end. But before I could process it further, Liam stepped toward the flames, ignoring me completely. The heat was intense now, and I could barely see through the smoke. I reached out for him one last time, but it was too late. In a heartbeat, he was gone, swallowed by the fire. I screamed, feeling a coldness seep into my bones as I realized the truth. It was too late to stop him. The fire, once a symbol of destruction, now became a cruel metaphor for the life I had built. Liam's life had been consumed by it, the fire of his past love, the fire of his unspoken desires, and it had taken him from me. It had taken everything. As the fire raged, I stood there, paralyzed with grief and anger. And then, in the chaos that followed, I saw something that would haunt me forever: the body of Liam Bennett, burned beyond recognition, lying in the wreckage of the house he had run toward. The fire had consumed him, just as it had consumed all the lies. In the aftermath of his death, I was left with more questions than answers. How could I have been so blind? How could I have lived all these years, believing in a man who had never truly cared for me the way I thought he had? The love I had given him was gone, reduced to ashes. But there was something else I felt, something deep within me. A sense of freedom. A chance to reclaim the life I had sacrificed for him. And as the townspeople gathered around, whispering about the tragedy, I knew that this was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. A new chapter, where I would no longer live for Liam, but for myself. Chapter 3: The Will. The room was quiet, almost suffocating in its stillness. The scent of old wood and leather-bound books filled the space, mingling with the faint aroma of the flowers that had been left untouched since the funeral. I sat at the long, polished table, my fingers nervously tapping against the edge as I tried to steady my breath. Beside me, our son, Daniel, fidgeted with the cuff of his shirt, his face as pale as mine. Across from us sat the lawyer, a man I had seen countless times over the years, though never with the burden of the moment that now weighed down on him. The lawyer cleared his throat, his hand trembling as he adjusted his glasses. I could tell that this moment, this reading of the will, was a delicate thing. A final act of closure, or so I had hoped. I had thought I had already endured the worst of it. Liam's death, the tragic way he had left this world, the years of devotion I had given him. But what was coming, I could never have prepared myself for. The lawyer shuffled the papers in his hands, before looking up at me with a solemn expression. He began reading Liam's final words, the words that would forever define the legacy he left behind. To my beloved son, Daniel, I leave all that is mine, all that I have earned, and all that I have built. May you carry it forward with honor, for you are the future of our family. I blinked, my heart sinking as I processed the words. Of course, Daniel would receive everything. He was our son, after all. He deserved what was his by right. I swallowed hard, pushing away the bitterness that threatened to rise in my throat. I knew this was coming, in a way. But then, the lawyer's voice changed. It grew softer, as though he were treading carefully around something dangerous. To the woman who has spent 40 years by my side, taking care of me, and believing in me, Emily, I leave you nothing, for you were never truly mine. I have spent my entire life compensating you through marriage, but our family tradition forbids actresses from being honored in the ancestral hall. You were never more than an obligation, a debt I owed. Our love was a contract, and now, it ends with this. The words hit me like a physical blow, each syllable a dagger that buried itself deep in my chest. I couldn't breathe. The room felt as though it were closing in around me, the walls pressing against me as if to suffocate the very air from my lungs. I glanced at Daniel, who looked as stunned as I felt. He didn't know. He couldn't know the truth. But I did. I had spent 40 years believing in a love that had never truly existed, a life built on lies and half-truths. The man I had married, the man I had cared for, the man I had devoted myself to, had never seen me as an equal. The lawyer's voice continued, but I couldn't hear him anymore. All I could hear was the echo of Liam's final words. "You were never truly mine." Those words haunted me, replaying in my mind like a broken record. You were never truly mine. The silence in the room felt suffocating now. I could feel the weight of those words crushing my chest, my thoughts swirling in a haze of disbelief and grief. It wasn't just the money that stung, although the thought of all those years of sacrifice being worth so little was unbearable. It was the way he had dismissed me, reduced me to an obligation. To think that for all these years, I had worked tirelessly, caring for him, sacrificing my own desires, my own needs, only for him to leave me nothing, not even a semblance of affection in his final moments. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation. But instead, I sat there in stunned silence, my hands shaking in my lap. Daniel, his face pale and contorted with confusion, turned toward me. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice was shaky, unsure. He had always been the one to look to me for guidance, but now it was clear that he, too, was struggling with the enormity of what had just been revealed. I looked up at him, forcing a weak smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm fine, Daniel." Just shocked. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine at all. As the lawyer continued with the reading, I barely registered the words. All I could focus on was the letter Liam had left behind. He had written it with his own hand, just before his death. The same hand that had once held mine with promises of love and devotion. The same hand that had gripped the wheelchair, pretending to be disabled when all along, he had been hiding a secret life. I could feel the weight of betrayal crushing me, the finality of it all settling like a stone in the pit of my stomach. The family tradition he had mentioned, the one that forbade actresses from being honored in the ancestral hall, was the key to everything. I had never been more than a mere replacement for someone else. I had always been second best, never truly loved or valued. His first love. The woman he had never stopped pining for. After the reading, the lawyer left, leaving us alone in the room. The house, once filled with the hum of daily life, now felt hollow and empty. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the window. I couldn't look at Daniel right now. I couldn't bear to see his confusion, his pain. I looked out at the garden, the same garden where Liam had once sat, where I had cared for him with such devotion. It all seemed so pointless now. I was never truly his. The thought echoed through my mind again, and this time, I didn't try to push it away. I let it settle into my bones, into my soul. This was the truth. And it was the hardest truth I had ever had to face. But even in the wake of this betrayal, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I didn't need Liam's approval. I didn't need his love, his recognition, or his fortune. What I needed was the freedom to live for myself. I turned away from the window, facing Daniel. "We're going to be okay," I said softly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "We'll figure this out." Chapter 4: The Final Blow. The room felt suffocating as the lawyer finished reading the final lines of Liam's will. His voice, calm and steady, reverberated in the silence that hung heavy between us. I could feel the coldness of his words seeping into my very bones, like a chill that I could never shake. The final blow that Liam had dealt me was as painful as it was unexpected. And the final condition, the lawyer continued, clearing his throat, "If you agree not to erect a gravestone after my death, I will gift you the pocket watch." The words echoed in my ears, each syllable a cruel reminder of everything I had sacrificed, everything I had given up for him. My heart seemed to freeze in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The pocket watch, the one piece of jewelry that had been passed down through Liam's family for generations, was the one thing he had ever truly valued. But to offer it to me in exchange for my silence, for my submission to his legacy of neglect and disrespect? It felt like an insult, a mockery of everything I had been to him. I glanced at Daniel, who had been silent since the reading began. His eyes were wide, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. He was trying to process everything, trying to understand why his father, my husband for so many years, had left us with so little but hurt. He didn't understand the weight of what I had endured, and I wasn't sure I could explain it to him. Not yet. But I had to speak. For myself. For the life I had lived, for the life I was now trying to rebuild. Is this really what he thought of me? I whispered, more to myself than to anyone in the room. My voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and quiet rage. After everything, this is what he leaves me with? The lawyer, who had been glancing nervously at the door, cleared his throat again. I'm afraid that's all, Mrs. Bennet. The pocket watch, and the condition of not erecting a gravestone. His request was very clear. I nodded, though my heart was far from calm. I had lived with Liam for 40 years, devoted to him through every hardship, every sacrifice. I had believed in the marriage we had built, in the love I thought we shared, even when the signs were there that it was never truly a partnership. He had never seen me as his equal. I had always been his caretaker, his servant, nothing more. And now, at the end of it all, he wanted me to disappear. To let him pass from this world without a trace of the woman who had stood by his side, who had given him everything. I took a deep breath, letting the pain wash over me like a wave. I had to be strong. For myself. For Daniel. No, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. I won't let him erase me like this. Not after everything I've done for him. Not after all the years I've given. Daniel looked at me, his eyes full of concern. What do you mean, Mom? You're not seriously going to refuse the pocket watch, are you? It's valuable. It's not about the watch, I interrupted, my voice stronger now. It's about the principle. It's about the man I spent my life with, who never once valued me the way I deserved. He wanted to erase me, Daniel. To leave me without a trace, without a mark on the world. But I won't let him do that. I won't be forgotten. Not like this. I turned away from the lawyer and walked to the window, staring out at the garden that Liam and I had once tended together. The garden now seemed so distant, so foreign. It felt like the remains of a life that had never truly been mine. But I wasn't going to let him control me from beyond the grave. I wasn't going to be a footnote in his legacy, a woman erased by his refusal to acknowledge what I had given him. I'll make sure a gravestone is erected, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. Not for him, but for me. For the woman who was more than just his housekeeper. For the woman who spent her life giving everything to a man who could never see her for who she was. And I'll make sure everyone knows. Everyone will know what he did. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, glancing nervously between us. Mrs. Bennet, I can't advise you to go against the terms of the will. Then don't advise me, I said, my voice sharp but controlled. I don't need your advice. I know what I'm doing. The lawyer nodded, collecting his papers. I'll leave you to think about it. If you decide to proceed with the gravestone, you'll need to notify the cemetery. As he left, the weight of the decision I had just made settled in my chest. I didn't need Liam's approval, his gifts, or his approval to live my life. I had spent too long in the shadow of a man who never truly cared for me. It was time for me to stand tall, to make my mark on the world, even if it meant going against everything Liam had ever wanted. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I allowed myself a moment to reflect. I had lived for so long under Liam's thumb, trying to be what he wanted me to be, trying to fill a role that I was never meant to play. And for what? To be left with nothing but a pocket watch and the cruel words of a man who had never understood me? No more. I would no longer let his shadow define me. I would no longer allow his rejection of me to dictate my future. I would build my own legacy, one that was mine alone. The following days were a blur of emotions and decisions. I contacted the cemetery, making arrangements for the gravestone. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the right decision, but deep down, I knew it was. Liam's death, and the way he had treated me, had been a catalyst for change. I had spent 40 years living for him, but now, I was going to live for myself. The gravestone would stand not as a monument to Liam, but as a symbol of my resilience, my strength, and my refusal to let a lifetime of sacrifices be forgotten. And as I stood before it, years later, I knew that I had done the right thing. I had reclaimed my dignity, my voice, and my future. Chapter 6: Rewriting My Story. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I sat alone, a cup of lukewarm tea cooling in front of me, as the weight of Liam's death settled deeper into my bones. For 40 years, I had been his caretaker, his shadow, his unrecognized partner in a life built on lies and manipulation. And now, with him gone, the life I had once known was nothing more than an echo of a distant past, a past that had confined me, defined me, and almost broken me. But I was done living in the shadow of the man who had never truly seen me. For so long, I had been a mere footnote in his story, his loyal wife, his ever-supporting caretaker, his silent partner. But now, I had a choice: let the past define me or rise above it. I chose to rise. The days following Liam's death were a whirlwind of legalities, family disputes, and endless paperwork. I handled it all with a calm that surprised even me. There was no room for grief, no time to mourn a man who had never truly been mine. As I sat in the lawyer's office, listening to the details of his will, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as though I were hearing about someone else's life rather than my own. But beneath that detachment was a fire that had been smoldering within me for years, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Liam's betrayal, his manipulations, his refusal to ever truly recognize my worth, these things had built up inside me, and now, with him gone, I would no longer allow them to hold me down. I would rewrite my story. The first step was easy. I went through the motions, handling the funeral arrangements, the lawyers, and the inevitable confrontation with his family. But I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. For the woman I had always been beneath the layers of servitude and guilt. The lawyer's words still echoed in my mind: "I have spent my entire life compensating you through marriage. Our family tradition forbids actresses from being honored in the ancestral hall." His words, sealed in that cold, final letter, had been the breaking point. That was the moment I realized how little he had ever valued me. How little I had valued myself. I had let him dictate the terms of my existence, allowing him to create a life for me where I was nothing more than a background character. But not anymore. I took the first real step toward reclaiming my life when I signed the papers to sell the house we had shared for so long. The house that had once been my prison was now a symbol of my freedom. The house that I had kept so pristine, so perfect, so his, now it would belong to someone else. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts. His concern was evident in the furrow of his brow, but I could see the admiration in his eyes too. He had been hesitant at first, unsure of the path I was choosing. He wanted me to grieve, to process everything, to heal. But I couldn't afford to wait. I couldn't afford to dwell on the past anymore. It had taken too much of me already. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "This is my time now. My life." I'm not going to let him control it anymore. Not from the grave, not from his will, not from the life he built on lies. Daniel's gaze softened, but he still didn't fully understand. How could he? He had never been trapped in the web of lies I had been. He had never been held hostage by a love that wasn't love, by a man who had only ever seen what he could take from me. The next few months were a blur of change. I found a small apartment in a quieter part of town, a place I could call my own. A place where no one would know me as Liam Bennett's wife but as Emily Bennett, the woman who had reclaimed herself. I started doing things for myself, things I had longed to do but had never had the chance to. I started taking walks in the park, reading books I had neglected, and, for the first time in a long while, allowing myself to breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations crushing me. One evening, after a long day of sorting through the remnants of my past, I sat in my new living room, the soft light from the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. I thought of all that I had lost, but more importantly, I thought of all that I had gained. For the first time in decades, I felt free. It was then that the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was important. I hesitated before picking it up, the weight of my past still heavy in my chest. "Hello?" I answered. Emily, a familiar voice said, one I hadn't heard in months. "It's me, Liam's lawyer. I just wanted to let you know that some additional matters regarding the estate have come to light. I need to speak with you." I felt a jolt of frustration rise within me. "What more is there to discuss?" I said, my voice sharp. "The will was read, the estate is being settled. I've moved on from all of that." "I understand," he said, a slight pause on the other end. "But there's something you need to know. Liam left something behind, something you might want to hear about." I didn't want to hear it. I didn't need any more reminders of the man who had betrayed me, but curiosity gnawed at me. "Fine," I said, my tone weary. "What is it?" The lawyer hesitated again before speaking. "He left you a letter. A final message for you, Emily. It's addressed to you, personally." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, resentment, anger, confusion. I hadn't asked for any final message from him. I didn't want anything more from him. But I knew, deep down, that I had to face it. I had to see the end of this chapter, even if it was one final attempt at control. When I opened the letter later that evening, I wasn't sure what I expected to find. The words he had written had been cold and distant, but as I read, I could feel a strange shift within me. In his letter, Liam wrote about his regrets, about how he wished things had been different. He expressed his sorrow for the way he had treated me, though it was clear that it was more about his own guilt than any genuine remorse. But something else caught my eye, a phrase that felt almost like a challenge. "I hope you find the strength to forgive me, Emily. You've always been stronger than you realize." It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was enough to realize that I had spent so much of my life trying to be what he wanted, what he needed, only to forget what I needed. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about moving forward. And that's exactly what I did. In the weeks that followed, I started building a new life. A life that was mine. I took on a job at a local bookstore, where I spent my days surrounded by stories and characters who had nothing to do with my past. I met new people, formed new connections, and allowed myself the space to grow. For the first time, I felt like I was truly living, not as Liam's wife, not as someone else's shadow, but as Emily Bennett. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined me. As I stood in front of the mirror that evening, looking at the woman who stared back at me, I saw someone I hadn't recognized for a long time. But now, for the first time in years, I liked what I saw. I had rewritten my story. And this time, it was mine to tell. Chapter 7, A New Beginning, A Familiar Face. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden hue over the bustling street outside the bookstore. The soft hum of conversations and the gentle rustle of pages in the shop brought me a sense of calm, a peace I had longed for in the chaos of my past. I had learned to embrace this new life, one that was mine, built on my own terms, far from the shadows of Liam and the life we had shared. I was beginning to feel like myself again, like I could breathe without the weight of years spent in someone else's story. The bookstore was a haven, a quiet refuge where I could lose myself in the world of words and stories, where I wasn't just a wife or a caretaker, but simply Emily, the woman I had forgotten existed for far too long. The owner of the shop, Mrs. Jenkins, was a kind, older woman who took me under her wing. She had seen something in me that I hadn't recognized in myself: potential, strength, and resilience. Her encouragement had been a steady presence, reminding me that I was capable of more than I had ever believed. "Emily," she called one afternoon, interrupting my thoughts as I arranged a display of new books. "There's someone here to see you." I glanced up, a bit surprised. My heart skipped a beat, unsure of who could be visiting me at the bookstore. I hadn't expected anyone from my past to seek me out. But as I turned the corner to the front counter, I froze. It was Daniel. My son, standing there with a somber look on his face, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't place. He had changed, grown, in the months since Liam's death, but it wasn't just his physical transformation that caught me off guard. It was the quiet sorrow that seemed to hang in the air around him. "Mom," he said softly, his voice strained. "Can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing for him to follow me to the back of the store where we could speak privately. My heart ached at the sight of him, this young man who had lived through so much, who had seen his father's deception and my own quiet suffering. But I knew I had to remain strong. For both of us. We sat across from each other at a small table in the corner of the bookstore. The sounds of the outside world, footsteps, car engines, distant chatter, seemed muffled, as if the world had paused for a moment just for us. "Mom," Daniel began again, his voice trembling. I don't know how to say this, but I think you need to know. His ex-wife, Catherine, she's come back. She's looking for you." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Catherine. The woman who had haunted our lives from the shadows. The one whose return I had feared, even as I had tried to build my new life. "I thought I was done with all of this," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. The thought of facing Liam's past, of confronting the woman who had always held a place in his heart, was overwhelming. I had left all of that behind. I had chosen to rise above the lies and betrayal, but now, here was another reminder of everything I had tried to escape. Daniel's gaze softened as he reached across the table, his hand gently brushing mine. "I know, Mom. I know it's not easy. But I just thought you should know. She's persistent. She wants to meet with you." The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to hide from the past, to continue living in the new world I had built. But another part of me felt an undeniable pull, an urge to face this woman, to confront the shadows that had been cast over my life. I spent the next few nights unable to sleep, my mind racing. What did Catherine want from me? Why now, after all these years? And, most importantly, how would I respond? One evening, after another restless night, I decided I couldn't ignore it any longer. I would meet her. I would face the truth, whatever it might be, and then I would decide how to move forward. The day of the meeting arrived. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple dress I had chosen, nothing extravagant, nothing to impress. Just me, as I was. I stared at my reflection, taking in the woman who had once been trapped by guilt and fear, and the woman I was now, a woman who was ready to take control of her life. I didn't know what to expect from Catherine. The woman who had once been Liam's love, the woman who had never known the truth of his betrayal. But I knew this, whatever happened, I wouldn't let her take anything from me. I wouldn't let her drag me back into the world I had so carefully escaped. When I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet, I saw her immediately. Catherine sat at a corner table, her back to the window, her posture rigid, her face a mask of cold resolve. She hadn't changed much, but there was something different in the way she carried herself, a certain weariness that had replaced the youthful arrogance she once had. I walked over to her, my steps measured, my heart steady. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I had made my choice. I wasn't going to let her control this meeting. Not anymore. She looked up when I approached, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she had been expecting a confrontation. "Emily," she said, her voice sharp but with an underlying trace of something I couldn't quite place. "It's been a long time." "Yes, it has," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "And I didn't expect this meeting. I didn't expect you to show up at all, honestly." Catherine's lips twitched into something that resembled a smile, but it was bitter, tinged with years of unspoken resentment. "I'm sure you didn't. But I've come to make things right. Or at least, I hope I can." I raised an eyebrow, not sure if I was hearing her correctly. Make things right? After all these years, after everything that happened? She nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to the side as if she were avoiding my direct stare. "I know what Liam did. I know how he lied to you, how he made you think you were the only one. But Emily, I was there first. I was the one who he left behind, the one who he promised everything to. And now, I want to make peace. With you, with everything." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with history and unspoken truths. I could feel my chest tightening, the familiar anger creeping in, but I forced it back. This wasn't about Catherine, it was about me. I had already made peace with Liam's betrayal. I had already made peace with my past. This wasn't my fight anymore. "Peace?" I asked, the word tasting strange on my tongue. "You want peace? After all these years of silence, after everything that happened? How can you expect me to just forgive and forget?" "I don't expect forgiveness," Catherine replied quietly. "I just want you to understand. Understand that I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. I didn't know what to say. There was too much history, too much pain, too much to unpack in a single conversation." But as I sat there, looking at the woman who had once been Liam's first love, I realized something. This meeting wasn't for her, it was for me. I stood up slowly, looking down at her for a moment before speaking. "I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you. Liam is gone, and so is everything he left behind. I've made my peace, and now I'm moving forward. I suggest you do the same." As I turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of closure settle over me. The past had come to knock on my door, but I had faced it and sent it on its way. I was no longer bound by the mistakes of the men in my life, no longer held hostage by their decisions. I had made my choice. And for the first time in years, I felt completely free. Chapter 8: A Dream Realized. The days stretched into weeks, and the weight that had once pressed heavily on my shoulders had finally lifted. I could feel the shift deep within me. The chains of my past, of Liam, of guilt, of betrayal, had all broken, and I was free. Free to live for myself, free to chase the dreams I had long abandoned, buried under years of sacrifice and compromise. I had always loved books, the stories they held, the worlds they opened up. But for so long, I had let that love sit dormant, pushed aside by the demands of a life I never chose. Now, with Liam gone, with everything from that part of my life finally settled, I could finally breathe and step into the person I had been meant to be all along. The bookstore, once just a job to pay the bills, was now more than that. It was a symbol of my new beginning, a place where I could nurture my love for literature and share it with others. I had started small, helping Mrs. Jenkins with the daily tasks, but soon, I found myself organizing readings, helping curate the shop's inventory, and even starting my own book club. The community that had embraced me in my darkest days now stood by me as I built something that was mine. One afternoon, while arranging a stack of new arrivals, a figure walked through the door, and I looked up to find a man I hadn't seen in years, Henry, the quiet man who had been my rock when I thought I had nothing left. He stood at the entrance, his eyes soft yet full of something I hadn't expected, pride. "Emily," he said, his voice warm. "I've been meaning to tell you something." I smiled, feeling a quiet thrill in my chest. Henry had been there for me when I was at my lowest. He had been kind when I needed kindness, steady when I needed stability. But more than anything, he had respected me when I had learned to respect myself. "What is it, Henry?" I asked, my voice tentative, unsure of what he was about to say. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "You've come so far. You've built something beautiful, something that's truly yours. And I think it's time you take the next step." I tilted my head, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Henry stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You've always dreamed of writing. You've always had stories in you, Emily. Maybe it's time you share them with the world." I stared at him, struck by his words. Writing. I had spent so many years hiding my passion, believing I wasn't worthy of it. But now, with every step I took into this new life, I realized something: my dreams weren't just distant, far-off ideas. They were within reach. And it was time to seize them. The following months were a whirlwind. I wrote every morning, every evening, pouring my heart into stories I had kept locked away for far too long. The quiet moments of the bookstore were now filled with my thoughts, my characters coming to life with every keystroke. Henry encouraged me every step of the way, his quiet presence a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. Soon, I found the courage to send my first manuscript to a publisher. It wasn't easy, there were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if it was all worth it. But I pushed forward. For the first time in my life, I wasn't doing something for someone else. I was doing it for me. And then, the day came when I received the letter. The words jumped off the page: "We'd like to offer you a publishing contract." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, the weight of the moment sinking in. I had done it. I had finally made it. The dream I had shelved for so long was now coming true, and it felt more incredible than I could have imagined. I stood in the bookstore that afternoon, looking around at the shelves of books, at the community that had become my new family. There was still so much to be done, so many stories to write, and so many new beginnings waiting to unfold. Henry stood beside me, his eyes knowing. "You did it, Emily." I smiled, a sense of peace settling over me. I did. And it feels like it's just the beginning. As the years went by, the bookstore continued to thrive, and my books found their way into the hands of readers who needed the escape, the solace, and the joy I had always longed to provide. My life was mine, and the stories I told were finally mine to share. There were still moments of reflection, moments when I thought of the past, the years I had spent in the shadow of someone else's choices, the pain I had endured, and the love I had lost. But as I sat at my desk, writing, creating, and living, I realized that those years hadn't defined me. They had shaped me, yes, but they no longer had the power to hold me back. I was no longer bound by the past. I was free, living the life I had always deserved, a life filled with stories, with dreams, and with a future that was mine to write. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The end.